We don't know a whole lot about what Robert Brashears did once he left the Navy. When I reported on Brashears in the fall of 2025, Deborah told me that according to family, her father worked as a bartender in Huntsville, Alabama, and on an oil rig in Louisiana around that time. This is a period of time where investigators question if Brashears committed any violent crimes. Remember, in November 1980, he put his own obituary in the newspaper in his hometown of Newport News, Virginia, and where he was living in New Orleans. He did that for a reason. Austin, Texas detective Dan Jackson managed to pick up Brashears' trail around 1981.
He had a Texas driver's license for a while. He got one in, I think, 81, and we don't know why. That the building doesn't exist anymore. It was a trailer park that's now just woods.
Have you looked back yet into old Texas files yet to see if you've got anything else?
A little bit. We've reached out to the Texas Rangers because they handle a lot of cold cases, especially for smaller jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
And asked, hey, put this guy on your radar for this kind of MO. We haven't found anything from that 81 time frame, but we got plenty of time to look for it.
Every Robert Brashears timeline I've seen has another hole in it from 1981 to 1984. We know Brashears turned up in Florida in 84, then committed his first documented violent crime in 1985, which sent him to prison from 1986 to May of 1989. After his release, Deborah Brashears told me that family told her Robert worked at a heating and air conditioning business in Atlanta and as a construction worker back in Huntsville. But in the spring of 1990, you learned in Chapter 9 of this podcast that Brashears landed a maintenance job at a Greenville, South Carolina apartment complex. Former New Madrid County, Missouri Sheriff's Deputy Chris Hensley traveled to Greenville looking for anyone who remembered having contact with Brashears at that time.
And nobody remembers him, nobody worked with him, nobody that was a resident at the time that he was there, brought up that he was weird to them.
And no one knew why he would have targeted 28-year-old Genevieve Zatricki. Jenny was Brashears' first documented murder victim, but we don't know if she truly was his first. And Hensley mentioned something else about Greenville that reminded me. Robert Brashears was not just a serial killer. He was also a career criminal.
Just back behind the apartment complex, there was a house with a couple of elderly people, I believe, that somebody had broke in on. But they were home when somebody had broke in late at night. And we were thinking that might have been Robert breaking in on them. But there was a couple of, unsolved break-ins, in the area that we would read through, that no suspects were ever arrested.
Certainly could have been him.
Yes.
So there could be other break-ins or sexual assaults like the Memphis case, or unsuccessful crimes like the Paragould neighbor case that could be tied to this killer. And as they work, investigators are also clearing up some false leads. For example, Robert Brashears did have a cousin who lived in Austin, Texas in 1991, the same year as the yogurt shop murders. But according to Detective Jackson, that cousin had no connection to Brashears and had no idea they were even related until Jackson told him they were. It is no cliche to say Robert Brashears was all over the map, as a serial killer and as a person in general. In the fall of 2025, I stood in front of a map of the United States with Missouri State Highway Patrol investigators Chris Hamlet and Alex Lacey, as they put red tabs down on all the states Brashears had a connection to. his home state of Virginia, states he lived in, Alabama, Indiana, Louisiana, his murder states, South Carolina, Missouri, Kentucky, and Texas. Sergeant Hamlet noted a change in Brashear's movement when they learned he was the prime and only suspect in the yogurt shop murders.
But then when we connect Austin to it, it's like, okay, so he's traveling more extensively maybe than what we thought. We know that at one time he had a connection in Washington as well. You look at the map, and I think anything's a possibility at this point.
And now
You can't rule anything out.
you're coast to coast now.
Right.
Yes.
Sergeant Hamlet pointed to the southwestern portion of the United States as he spoke.
This is where he's comfortable, but what's taking him out here, we don't know.
I found Texas investigators wondering the same thing.
We also can't figure out what the heck he was doing in Austin, Texas.
Mindy Monford worked on the yogurt shop case for years, most recently with the Texas Attorney General's office.
You look at the map, and I had a whole map in our office with pins, where he had been. And, most of it was sort of confined to that, from Florida on up, right, to the eastern border. And then you had then you have Kentucky, and you've got Tennessee a little bit, out there. And then we know he was in Texas. He's got the Arkansas. I mean, it's, I remember buying that map actually, and they had options, like you could do the southeastern part of the United States, or you could do the full part of the United. And I thought, with this guy, I'm gonna have to do the full United States. I can't limit it.
Monford also saw something seen by other investigators who put Brashear's and his crimes on a map.
You can see how easy it was for him to move from state to state. When you see it on paper, you think, wow, he was in this state, one day, and then the next state. But really, those cities were right along the border. He was able to just hop, a couple of hours away.
So maybe Brashear's crimes are all within a couple of hours of where he lived. But if investigators don't know where he lived for years at a time, well, you can see the challenges they face. And they are still coming up empty when it comes to friends, acquaintances, or possible accomplices. It is clear his father helped him on some level, bailed him out of jail, recovered a likely murder weapon from federal custody. But Dulles Brashears, like his son, is long gone. Missouri Sergeants Chris Hamlet and Alex Lacey have talked to Brashear's living brother, Gary. You may remember Brashears told the victim in his 1985 attempted murder case in Florida that his name was Gary.
I can speak to the living brother. Nothing but kind to us, nothing but cooperative to us. He was devastated when we told him. To say that him and Robert lived different lifestyles, I think, is an understatement. I'm assuming him and Robert didn't have much of a relationship. They had really kind of distanced themselves because, he knew he was a contributing member of society from what I could tell, and he knew that Robert was a very, very poor decision maker, and that's as nice as I can possibly put that. So I think he's the kind of guy that if he knew, he would say something.
He struck me as the kind of person that if he would have known, he wouldn't have been able to lie about it. And he was extremely forthcoming with us. Even after we had spoke with him, I was in contact with him for some time, and anything that popped in his mind, just, I think he might have been in this town one time, or so just racking his brain trying to help us.
It's something Robert Brashear's daughter, Deborah, continues to do. Try to help law enforcement track his movements and his crimes.
Helping others is something that I strive to do, but helping others and attaching myself to it emotionally is the hardest part.
Deborah can vividly remember the time she spent with her father in 1998, a violent year that would prove to be the last year of his life.
It completely fumbles me because the greatest time in my entire life was with my father in our lives.
But he could not control his rage. In March, Brashears drove to Portageville, Missouri, where he murdered Sherry and Megan Shear. He kept driving, then attacked a Dyersburg, Tennessee family that same night. Brashears came back home, then 2 weeks later tried to break into his neighbor's house with a gun and a video camera. Then, while out on bail in that case, he ran a vehicle into a fence after robbing a different neighbor. It's behavior that caused Deborah to tell me this during our first interview in 2019.
And the family man and the serial killer and rapist did not mix until 98, when he started going crazy. My mother would leave for work and tell us, do not let him out of the house.
We talked about it again during our recent visit in late March. When you look now, knowing everything you know, the talk about him going crazy, quote unquote.
I'm never going back to prison. I'm not going back to prison.
Did you see the wheels coming off?
Slowly, yes.
The walls closing in on him. He's making
Falling
mistakes. Deborah believed her father knew he was living on borrowed time. So much so that he actually tried to take his own life in the late summer of 1998. Here's what she remembers.
He cut his own arm and his own neck, trying to kill himself. In August of 98, 7 days before my birthday. I had a tape recorder of him saying, I wonder if this is going to hurt. And it sounded like a saw in the background. For the longest time I had it. It sounded like a saw in the background. And he's like, oh, I wonder if this is going to hurt. And the next thing he knows, his neck and his arm's cut. We thought, okay, he's running around screaming, I'm not going back to prison. I'm never going back to prison, yada, 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 yada. So he knew he was about to die. He knew his death was coming close.
But Robert Brashears would live another 5 months. He still had time to sneak away to Lexington, Kentucky, and kill Linda Rutledge at her parents' hearing aid center. And now, Deborah knows her father killed 4 girls in a Texas yogurt shop when she was just a baby. It left her thinking what would have happened had he just served that full 12-year prison sentence in Florida. And you said something that really shocked me, and you said, I wish he would have served that sentence. I wouldn't have been born, but that's okay.
Yes, because there's how many different lives. I have a child. I love my life. But if you know the person that helped create you has killed 8 people, and if they would have kept him in prison before you were born, then, I mean, to trade your life for 8 people's lives.
So, had Brashears stayed behind bars, even for half his sentence, Jenny Zatricki would still be with us. Sarah and Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas, Amy Ayers, they would all still be with us. A serial killer's path would not have been set. But what about Deborah's?
I wish they would have never let him out. I would have been born regardless, just not to him.
Robert Brashears' life, his death, his crimes, all left permanent scars on so many people. But there is a real fear that his story is not over, that his victim count will grow when investigators link another cold case to the long-dead serial killer. It took 20 years to solve the murders of Sherry and Megan Shear, 27 years for Linda Rutledge, 28 years for Genevieve Zatricki, and 34 years for the families of Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, and Sarah and Jennifer Harbison to learn about a new yogurt shop suspect. And now, Sean and Angie Ayers don't want to see other families waiting decades in limbo like they did.
There's probably some other people out there without answers, and we deserve to help them get those. I don't want there to be. I hope that it's ended. I hope it ended at, we just found about or we knew about it, but Kentucky just found out about theirs. I hope that's it. I mean...
But it probably isn't.
Right.
That's next in Chapter 11 of Chasing a Ghost, Never Again.